All right, guys, welcome to the Buff Show. Today, we're going to be talking about pre-closing checklists for buyers and sellers. So, what you should be thinking about or aware of a few weeks leading up to closing on the home. So,
Perfect.
we got Mr. Ben Larson here. We're going to
I like the mister.
hash it out. So, obviously, at this point, you're already under contract, buyer, seller, like the terms thereof are laid out and everything. And it's basically just executing per the contract.
Right.
So, the biggest thing that I want to kind of start out with is what is the difference between settlement and closing? Because a lot of people think like, oh, settlement day is X day, we get the keys, right?
And that's a hard one.
Yeah. So let's kind of talk about that. So in the contract, if you look at 3.2, so settlement is when you need to go sign at the title company, and there's a few things that need to have happened. So settlement will occur when all of the following have been completed. Buyer and seller have signed and delivered to each other, the escrow closing office, all documents required by the REPC, by the lender, and by the title insurance and escrow closing offices, or by written escrow instructions, including any split closing instructions, if applicable, or by applicable law. Meaning you've signed all the paperwork required by the lender, title companies, and brokerages, basically. So that's A. And then 2 is all the monies paid to by the buyer and seller under these documents, except for any proceeds of the loan, have been delivered by the buyer and seller to the title company. So if buyer's doing a $100,000 down payment, that needs to be wired into the title company's account by settlement. And I see a lot of this happens quite a bit where buyers will wire it later on settlement day and it doesn't hit until the next day. Technically, you just broke the contract.
Right. And that's why you always want to buffer a day or two.
Yeah. But the lender, keep in mind, the lender doesn't have to have their money in by closing day.
They have 4 days after closing.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Those are the main things. And then closing. So settlement is when you do those 3 things. You sign all the documents, you wire your monies. I mean, really basically those 2 things. And then closing means that settlement has been completed. Buyer and seller have signed. Buyer's money is wired in. And the proceeds of any new loan have been delivered to the lender, by the lender to the seller closing office. And then the applicable closing documents have been recorded with the county. So that's closing and recording. And these actions will take place no later than 4 calendar days after settlement. So if you put settlement on a Monday, technically it can fund and record and close Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It could close on Friday and still be okay.
Right.
By either party. So that's why it's always a good idea if you're buyer or seller, like let's define when we want to take possession and for recording, funding and recording to happen. And I've tried to put in like deadlines for this and lenders don't like it. I've had one lender kick back. It's kind of like just a good faith, like, hey, settlement's this day and we're going to try and fund and record the next day. But there's a lot of moving parts, things that we can't control. And no buyers, you can't get the keys before it records.
Right. Funds and records. So you'll hear in more of a slang term from us. We'll have settlement where we go to the office to sign, we do the woohoos and congrats. But you don't own that house until we fund, money gets sent, and record. The county puts it into your name.
Yeah.
You're not the owner until those 2 things happen, and they happen in that order. Money's then recording.
Yep.
So if you get pissed off at your agent because they won't give you the keys, that's because you don't technically own the house yet.
Yeah, and there's liabilities. If you start moving in before and something happens to the house or the lender doesn't wire the funds or something happens, like you don't get keys till you actually own the house. And so we're sticklers on that. So just whether you're buyer or seller, make sure you understand the difference between settlement and closing. And like Ben said, let's get you in and sign before settlement. Like if settlement's on a Friday, you could sign on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. Granted, it does depend on when the title company and the lender is ready. But oftentimes, if you have a good team, they can get you in a few days in advance and get you signed up.
Yep. Give you some buffer. Okay. Now that we know what the end game is and how we define that, let's talk about once you go under contract, what's one of the first things you want to start looking at? And that's a movie team. If you're going to hire, you're going to cross country or out of the state, or you just need to get some buddies and some trailers rounded up. start getting that booked, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're doing a professional mover, you need to get them booked in advance.
Yeah. So think about that. Start decluttering, make your move easier, pack what can be packed, give stuff away, and throw stuff away. We're actually in the process of moving, and my wife is currently like, we're like, this is DI, this one we're giving away. Like, it's just crazy how much stuff you accumulate.
Especially when you have a wife like mine.
Yeah. Yeah. So just start ahead of the game and get stuff. Start simplifying your life.
Because it'll get quicker and quicker, and then you find yourself in that last week and it'll be painful.
Right. And then about a week prior, you can call all your utility and service providers and let them know about the change. If you're a seller, don't tell them you're canceling the service. Just say, we're moving and a new buyer is going to be taking my spot. And
if you say canceling, they'll shut the utility. A lot of times they'll shut the utility off.
Yeah.
And then it'll cost money to get a, what do they call it?
Like
a turn-on fee or a reinstatement fee.
Yeah. So just say, hey, we're closing on our house this day. Buyers will be calling to switch the utilities into their name this day. This is my last day as owner of the home. Say it's Friday, September 15th, then that's the day. And you can call that in advance. So you want to call the power company, natural gas company, water, sewer, and garbage. Sometimes that's just all one city. The other times there's separate companies.
Separate entities.
HOA, your TV, your internet, your homeowner's insurance. And then just like any memberships you've had in the area, like if there's a gym you go to, but you're not going to live in that city anymore, like you can cancel that ahead of time.
Because if not, how many times I've done that and just been paying.
Right.
I'm like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and remind you, everything we've talked about goes for buyers and sellers, right? If you're going to pack, start packing, be ready. If you're going to, you need to call as a buyer as well a week prior to closing. Hey, I'm going to be moving into this house. I'll take up on this date.
It doesn't have to be a week. I see way too often that we're trying to get sellers and buyers signed the day of settlement, and they're trying to do all the utilities, their wire, everything the same day and pack and move. Like let's think ahead of the game here and kind of create a plan so that everything's not like falling
slammed in them one day of stress.
Yeah. Like we can make this easier on you guys. And that's the point of this podcast. So
a big one is forward your mail to your new address.
Yep.
And same with buyers and sellers on that one too. That is the biggest pain in the butt when you have mail going into a million places. Anybody and everybody that's sending you stuff, garbage bills or dumpsters, or for other properties you might have, change it so you're not chasing it down for years.
Update your Amazon account.
Oh yeah. I know how many times I have a buyer call me and say, hey, the seller's packages keep showing up. How do I get a hold of them?
I know. Just update it. Make it easier. Another big one is know what your inclusions and exclusions are per the contract. And if you don't know, just go into your purchase contract and look up section 1.1 and 1.2. Talks about everything that's included and excluded in there, because you don't want to move something that is supposed to stay or vice versa. It's just a pain in the butt. Oh, yeah. Like I've had quite a few clients have to buy a new fridge or washer and dryer because they are like, oh yeah, I forgot that was included and we packed it up and moved it with us.
And that's a big one for a buyer too.
Yeah.
When you go into your new home, when you're doing your final, walkthrough, hey, what's on our included and excluded list?
Right. Yeah.
Fridges are the worst.
Yeah. And basically how I look at it, if you're a seller, anything like if I were to grab the house, pick it upside down and shake it, anything that would just fall off the walls, that stuff is just personal property. But if it's mounted, affixed to the property, shelving, bolted into the wall, TV mounts, like that stuff has to stay. Light fixtures, like your grandma's pendant light, like it's there unless you exclude it otherwise, right? So just be aware of that, because we want to make sure the things that you want to take are shown appropriately, right? Or negotiated appropriately. So let's talk about like a few days prior. There's a section in the contract. It's the final walkthrough inspection. And this is section 11. And it says no earlier than 7 days prior to settlement and upon reasonable notice and at a reasonable time, buyer may conduct a final pre-settlement walkthrough inspection of the property to determine that the property is as represented, meaning that the items referenced in section 1.1, 1.2, and 8.1b have been respectively present, repaired, or corrected as agreed. The failure to conduct a walkthrough inspection or claim that an item has not been represented shall constitute as a waiver by buyer of the right to receive on the date of possession the items represented.
Wow. You know what? I've read that how many times? Now we're just talking about represents shall not constitute a waiver by buyer of the right to receive. Oh, no,
so
that's
it's,
right.
It shall not. Yeah.
Shall not. I was
yeah.
like, okay.
You're like,
I heard that wrong. I was like, holy crap.
So if you're a seller, realize that the buyer's likely going to do a pre-walkthrough inspection, just verifying that the house is still there, hasn't burnt down, windows aren't broken, making sure it's in the condition that they originally saw it was, and that the items that are included and excluded are accounted for, basically. Yep. And typically we try and do that like within 48 hours of closing.
Right, because
settlement.
If you do it says no earlier than 7 days, but 7 days, people aren't usually moving out that early. Yeah. They're moving out the day before, 2 days before closing or settlement.
And I always get sellers that are like, oh no, like we're in boxes. And it's like, yeah, of course you're in boxes. Like the house isn't going to be in the clean, presentable condition that it was.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah, right. We're looking to make sure you haven't thrown a couch through a wall or cut a window out to get your big screen out the upper story, that kind of stuff.
Yep. So buyers, let's get that done 7 days before settlement. And then sellers, be aware that that's coming.
Be aware that it's coming and that you've got to get, if you agreed to repair or fix anything, it's got to be done usually before that 7 day period.
Yep.
Because that's when they're going to check.
Okay. And then section 10.2 talks about the condition and property buyer acknowledgement. So basically buyer acknowledges and this is 10.2, and agrees that in reference to the physical condition of the property, buyer is purchasing the property in as-is condition without express or implied warranties of any kind. Buyer shall have, during the buyer due diligence, as referenced in 8.1, an opportunity to complete and inspect and evaluate the condition of the property. If based on buyer's due diligence, buyer elects to proceed with the purchase of the property, buyer is relying wholly on buyer's own judgment that any of the contractors or inspectors engaged by buyer to review, evaluate, and inspect the property. And then the provisions of 10.2 shall survive closing. So basically, buyer, you are accepting the house in as-is condition. And then 10.3 talks about what the seller acknowledges. Seller acknowledges and agrees in reference to the physical condition of the property. They agree to disclose in writing to buyer any defects in the property known to seller that materially affect the value of the property that cannot be discovered by reasonable inspection by an ordinary prudent buyer. And then B, carefully review and complete and provide to buyer written seller property condition disclosures as stated in section 7. And all this is done like beforehand. But then this is where as we're nearing closing, the condition that the property has to be in. Deliver the property to the buyer in substantially the same condition as it was on the date of the acceptance, as defined in section 23, ordinary wear and tear accepted. Delivery of the property to the buyer in broom clean condition and free of debris and personal belongings. I want to bring that up.
I've had an experience with this one.
So, I mean, broom clean. That's like the seller is saying, "Hey, here's the property. It doesn't say deep clean. It says broom clean.
Yep.
Not vacuum clean." Unfortunately, it's pretty vague. And when I picture broom clean, it's not like a complete wipe down, 100%. perfect, it's clean basically. Not deep
basically
clean.
There's not pickable up debris on the ground.
Right. So broom clean and free of debris and personal belongings.
So I want to touch on that one more time. Broom clean means that they can leave the home essentially dirty.
Kind of.
Not with trash and stuff around and big objects, but they don't have to dust. They don't have to wipe out the cabinets. They don't have to wipe out your fridge. They don't have to wipe the floorboards. If the carpets have sputs on them, if they were there when we first walked through, they're there, right? Yep. So, and even though you should, as a seller, somewhat do your best to clean, buyers understand that we have no repercussion to make somebody clean their house at that point, right?
Right. It's pretty vague, and I've had a few times where it's like buyers get possession of the property and they're like, this isn't clean. And it's like, well, unfortunately, the sellers don't have unless you put it in the contract,
right,
seller to hire professional movers, cleaners, and then deep clean the carpets and everything like that. Like it's just broom clean and free of debris and personal belongings. That's it.
And then on the flip side, I've had almost $1 million home, massive home. Only 2 people lived there and they left stuff.
Yeah.
Not a bunch of trash, but some trash in the garage, like paint cans and stuff on counters in the basement. Just a lot of stuff everywhere. And we got called up at the closing table and they said, we are not closing on this house. And it ended up costing me like close to $700 because it was such a big house to hire a cleaner just to save a deal.
Gosh.
So that is, as you as a seller, it is broom cleaned, and I understand you don't have to clean it, but do your best to make it to where we're not going to have issues at the closing table.
And there's gray areas here. I had a deal a few years ago. It was a property on like 4 acres, and there was a log pile, and I don't even think my clients
knew that it was there.
Yeah, it was like back in the trees and brush, and it was just like somebody had pushed like with a dozer a bunch of trees and branches into a pile, and the buyers were like, "We want that cleaned up before we close," and I'm like, like it was a pain in the butt, but I'm like, free of debris. I don't know, like that's a big parcel. So we ended up, I hired a guy I brought my dump trailer over there, hired a guy to cut all the logs up, threw them in my dump trailer, and I hauled them away, and it completely filled up my dump trailer. And that's just what it took to get it across the finish line. But
these are things why we're discussing. This is why we're doing this. Let's talk about this before the day closes. So we're not trying to scramble and hire someone to clean or, doing stuff like that.
Well, and put yourself in the other person's shoes. If you're moving in, like whenever I sell a house or a property, like I want it to be in a better condition than I left it, right? Yeah. So I'm going to have it clean. I'm going to do more of a deep clean route.
Right.
That's just how I operate. But again, this is like, the conditions of the contract, so you're free to act accordingly. Just realize there are some gray areas there and some issues that can arise if it's not done right, I guess. So
right. It's a gray area, so somebody can, even though the contract says broom swept, you don't want to lose a deal because we're now arguing in court over the definition of broom swept.
Right. Yeah. Everybody has a different definition of what broom swept means. But my definition is that's not very clean. Right?
That's right. And I like to preface my buyers with that. Broom sweat is not very clean. So be prepared that you might have to do a wipe down on your house.
Well, and honestly, like
you should anyways,
right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just like trusting that they did like a really good job cleaning, which they probably didn't. So anyways, enough about that. Again, we talked about scheduling signing a few days early so that you're not rushed. What are your options when it comes to signing? So if you're a buyer, you can do in person at multiple locations at the title company. Most title companies will travel to your house or your work if we need to within reasonable hours. Like keep in mind, like if we can just think ahead and plan when you'll be in the area or a simple way to make it happen, like let's make it happen. But I've done closings at gas stations before. I've done it at like on the bed of a pickup truck, signing there. So it just depends on what we need to do to make it happen. But a lot of these title companies that we work with, they're flexible. They can meet us, but let's try and be reasonable with hours and realize that they have lives too, right?
Right.
And if we can plan ahead, let's plan ahead. So if you're cash, a lot of times, if you're a buyer, you can just do a DocuSign or digital signing.
And it depends on the loan you're using or the cash. Sorry.
Yeah. It'd be cash. So
and even sellers, you can do digital notary and stuff.
Yeah.
But once again, when you do anything that's not in the office sitting down, we need to know that that's what you want to do days, if not a week or so in advance.
Yeah.
Because we have to set it all up and also get information from you. So keep that in mind.
If you're a buyer, you're going to have a thicker stack of paperworks if you're getting a loan than the seller. So doing like a digital notary as a buyer, getting a loan, that'd be really hard. And I don't even know if the lender would allow it.
And some lenders won't allow it.
So most buyers, we sign in person at the location. We have the title reps there and then the lender and us typically. If you're a seller, you have a little bit more flexibility. We can do it in any location really with the title people there. You can do a mail out or a courtesy notary. If you're in a different state, they can mail you the documents. Keep in mind as a seller, most of the documents have to be wet ink signatures. And so it has to be overnighted back. So we need to plan for that time there. or there's a few digital notary companies that are coming out where you can do more of a digital, like online Skype type deal. So there's options, but let's just get that scheduled in advance. Let's keep the lender on target if you're the buyer, because sometimes we're waiting on the lender to get their documents in order to sign. But if you can get everything to the lender quickly, timely, and like in most cases, you're able to sign in advance versus like the day of settlement.
And honestly, on both sides.
Yeah.
You as a seller and you as a buyer control the tempo of this. We will push it to try to hit all of your deadlines. But you as a buyer, if you're not getting your documents to your lender and you're not getting the earnest money checks to us, usually it's always the client that is the pinch point. So be a good client and get your stuff when you're asked to get it so we can do a good job for you.
Right. Yep. Don't wait till the last minute. And then just when it comes to like purchasing the property, if you're a seller, let's get all the fine details like, hey, when's garbage day?
What internets do you use?
Yeah. What internet do you use? Where's the bus stop for the kids? What time does the bus, like just any info that you have on the property that we can't get. If you could get that to us, that makes it way easier that we can pass that along to the buyers. Where's the main shutoff lines? And if you're a buyer, let's try and get those questions answered by the seller so that we can kind of know the fundamentals and the ins and outs of the property.
Well, and I think it's a good how to keep someone on the hook more. You start giving information like that, and that you're really helping this buyer fill this home, like your kid's bus stop. Where does the mail get delivered if you don't have a mailbox? Garbage days, stuff like that. And it makes that process for your buyer so much easier, so they're not in a panic about it.
Yeah.
So it just helps smooth everything over.
Yep. And then lastly, it's just keys. When do you get keys? Well, that depends on when we close. Obviously, you have settlement. I would say 90% of transactions fund and record or close either the day of or the next day after settlement. So just keep that in mind. But we need to get everybody involved because you have to think about it. You have the buyer and seller, their title companies, their agents, and the lender. Everybody's got to be on the same page.
Yep.
And so when is the buyer's ideal time to get keys and when is the seller's ideal time to
give over
keys? When will they be out? And then let's plan that date in advance ahead of time.
Right.
So that it's smooth and seamless. And buyers, we will get you the keys once it's funded and recorded. Typically, when we go and do that final walkthrough of the house, the agent will take the keys from the key box and keep them with them until you get possession of the property or it's funded and recorded. And then we'll give you the keys. We'll meet you back at the property or they'll be in our office or whatever. But we'll get you the keys so that you can get in. Or it's a garage door code or something like that.
Or whatever else that gets us in. Yep.
Yeah. So, and then sellers leave all the owner manuals, garage door openers, your extra keys on the table in the house.
Yep.
So that the buyers, when they come in, they have all the spare keys. If you don't have keys to certain doors, like it's probably like, let's hire a locksmith and get them out there.
Get them all the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's simple and easy for them. So anything in there that we didn't cover that you'd like to mention?
Here's the thing. We went through that fast and there's a lot of it. The biggest thing I can say is time is always of the essence when it comes to real estate contracts, even in the scheduling.
Yeah.
The quicker we can know something, the quicker we can fix something, the quicker we can schedule something, the smoother everything is. So talk to your agents. If you have a hiccup or you can't do something on a certain day or you have a bar mitzvah and you haven't mentioned it until, I don't even know.
Bar mitzvah?
I don't know. I don't
know what that is. What is that?
I think it's like a Jewish coming of age thing.
Oh,
like
gotcha.
Yeah.
Anyways, if you have
we go. Yeah. So if you have something coming up or planned that falls in this contract period, let us know ASAP.
Yeah. And then one other thing I was going to add in there, home warranties. A lot of times those are issued at the day of like a closing for the buyer. So typically the title company or the agent will set that up, and then we'll just make sure you get that info if you're the buyer, so that you know that, hey, the home warranty started. A lot of home warranty companies will have like a rekey service in there that you can call them out, and for like $65, they'll rekey the property and things like that. So anyways, that's kind of a broad general overview of that process. Our goal is to make it as seamless as possible for you guys. And hopefully you're able to watch this going through the deal and it bikes some like, oh yeah, like I need to be thinking about that. Right. That was the intent of this podcast. So hopefully it's helpful. And whether you're buyer or seller, good luck on your new journey. And That's exciting. Till next time, guys.